Okay. So today we're on the set of Pioneers of the Independent Networks, which is a nice little company, webisode company that Tim Walker and myself, Ricky Blues, put together to keep alive the Mid-Atlantic archives. Because if you reach back into history, there is a ton of history, rich with history, of a lot of young men and women coming up in the Mid-Atlantic, fulfilling that professional wrestling dream, starting here and growing out to bigger and better things. And we've documented, we were part of, as a wrestler, Tim as working for Pro Wrestling Illustrated, we were part of that whole growth, and we wanted to make sure that we documented it and archived it for the folks coming behind us so that we can relive those magical moments and pass on the things that we've learned in this wrestling business to our next generation.
Yeah, that was a lot of exciting times.
It was. We're talking about a time where today you're very much segregated and broken into one specific little area. When I say the Mid-Atlantic, Tim, we were working in the Mid-Atlantic. We were working in Pennsylvania, we were working in Delaware, in Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland, New Jersey. That was our 6-state little circuit. Mm-hmm. And there was a ton of promotions that were in each of those areas that were bringing in a select group of wrestlers to work in those categories or work in those areas. And when I say that there was a small circuit going on, it absolutely was, because those storylines transcended different organizations. We worked together, we worked in opposition, but we always gave, what we were looking to do is give the fans that extra something to come back and see us. So it was a neat little time to...
It was a real special time, because look at now, independent wrestling is 25, 30 years old. Back then, it was in its infancy, and everything was new, everything was fresh.
Right.
There was quite a learning curve going on back then, and really it was a lot of unpredictable happenings going on in independent wrestling.
Well, people were developing their characters, and there was much more freedom on the indie circuit that grew out of the territories. It was the last vestige of the territories, because we saw parts of that next level coming through. Talking about Bam Bam Bigelow, Cactus Jack, those guys were coming through our promotions and working that circuit with us. So it really was the tail end of the territories, the growth of something new from its infancy, and it was a much broader breadth for people to develop their characters and not be hinged by what the big, I guess, organizations of that day only thought that wrestling should be. We had a much broader
There was
canvas.
A lot of thinking outside the box
Yes.
going on there, and a lot of new promotions, new promoters, new bookers, new wrestlers. Everything was really new. And you weren't really limited to a set of rules. The rules were kind of fast and loose at that point.
Right. Well, think about it. Every medium that you needed for that business was there. We had local television, because at that time, cable hadn't really taken the foothold that it was. There was some things going on, but local television was very big. You were still bicycling tapes, so we had television. We had airwaves, radio. They carried our story on different AM stations. We had the magazines. Our good friend Bill Apter, Stu Sachs, George Napolitano, they were covering all that. My close friend Tim Walker, part of the PWI family, was covering all that. So you had so many different mediums that were still in play. The internet, really, there was no internet. The social media was social, person to person. So that was quite an interesting time.
There really was a social aspect to it, because you got to meet people. You saw the same people at each event.
Right.
And you got to mingle, and you got to talk to them, you got to know them, you got to become friends with them. And some of the fans would gravitate towards Virginia and David Lehigh's promotion, depending on where they lived geographically. And then there were other fans who lived in the more northern parts of the Mid-Atlantic, who would gravitate toward New Jersey and Dennis Carluzzo and Larry Sharp's Monster Factory.
Right. And also Pennsylvania, when you talked about Phil Leibelsberger running the AWF in concert with Ed Zahn and also with Joel Goodhart. You're talking about the beginning threads of so many different organizations. ECW wasn't ECW, it was TWA. It was also part of the AWF. There was a great collaboration between those minds to actually develop a product. In Maryland, you had Lou Martin, in the central part of Maryland, but out on the western front, you had Tricky Dick.
Dick
Dick Karakoff, who also not only did Maryland, but West Virginia, and Virginia. Doug Stahl did a lot in West Virginia. And like you said, rounding it out, down in good old Virginia, David Lehigh in that northern part. And boy, oh boy, did he have the market cornered on bringing in that southern style NWA wrestling. Jim Cornette, the Midnight Express, the Rock and Roll Express, the Fantastics,
Ivan Koloff.
Ivan, Wahoo, Sam Houston, all of that was running up through that southern portion of what we like to refer to as those mid-Atlantic territories, our little circuit that we ran. And then we forgot also New Jersey, where we talk about where we talk about Jim Kettner and his fledgling ECWA at that time and what they were doing in the Delaware side.